We're on item number 33, Senate Bill 2111, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to pass that item and ask it retain its place on the calendar.
We'll pass item 33, and it will retain its place on the calendar. We're now on item number 34.
I'd like to call that item up and ask the title be read.
Mr. Clerk, please read the title.
Senate Bill number 2161, Common Core National Education Standards. SBE shall develop and implement new curriculum and assessment standards.
I make the usual motion.
Senator makes the usual motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. Senator Tolson, you're recognized.
I move adoption of the committee substitute in lieu of the original bill.
The motion is we adopt the committee sub in lieu of the original bill. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it.
Mr. President, I'd like to yield to Senator Carmichael for an explanation of the committee substitute.
Senator Carmichael, you're recognized to explain the committee sub.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I'll make my part as brief as I can. Early on this summer, I got to hearing things like you probably did, pro and con, about Common Core and the assessment, those kinds of things. And I got together with some people that I really trust, some former superintendents, some present superintendents, some teachers, former and present teachers, community people, people that I not just always associate with, but people I trust. And I said, we need to look and see what we need to do. And Bob Davidson put up with a lot. I'll have to give him credit. We had the bill I finally dropped was about the 7th or 8th draft of the bill. We would draft a bill, then I'd send it to different people, and we would talk about if it was good, if it was bad, what needed to be changed, etc. And we did that, as I said, 6, 7, 8 times. I really don't know. Bob hadn't shot me yet, but he did know what we were trying to do. The main thing is that we want to keep our standards and our expectations high for our students. There were some things about the name Common Core and some of the, some of the curriculum that followed because of some of the things they were having to teach to meet that criteria. And there were also a lot of questions, as I said many times, to me the proof is in the pudding. And the pudding to me is the assessment. The assessment, and you've heard PARC, the acronym, many times, I'm sure, throughout the course of this past year, that if you're going to be tested on whatever you're tested on is what needs to be taught, and vice versa. They need to match. And there were several questions about each. So even when the bill was dropped, and then we were in committee last week, we had a committee sub. So a lot of what's in this committee substitute is language we came up with, and then there was an amendment to the committee sub in committee, which is fine. But what you should have now is a summary of the committee sub, and it basically says that before July 1 of 16, the State Board shall hear the recommendations from a commission. Now, this commission was part that was developed in an amendment that was added in committee, which is fine, and it'll tell you in the committee sub itself what the commission is. But it also says the State Board will consult with the Commission on college and career readiness to assist the Board in creating and adopting curriculum standards for the new Mississippi College Career and Readiness Standards. Well, also established this 24-member blue ribbon panel that would be called the Mississippi Commission on College Career Readiness. And the appointees will be from the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker of the House, etc. I'm not going to insult you by reading it to you, but you see the other language there. And then we also want to make sure that the State Board remove the Common Core copyright in any references to Common Core standards from this Mississippi College Career Readiness Standards, and immediately withdraw from PARC. The state of Mississippi, which is important to me, should retain sole control over the development, establishment, and the revision of our K-12 standards and the state-required assessments of those standards. Also, as you can see the next bullet point, the State Board is empowered and directed to adopt a research-based formative assessment system which would be aligned with those new standards. The next bullet point, of course, State Board of Education developed the policies, procedures to limit the amount of time and the cost and the disruption caused by standardized student testing, and then make a report to us, the legislature. Next page, of course, as you can read, beginning in 16-17, these standards will be reviewed by the State Board every 8 years, and the assessments change to align with those standards in the same cycle. And then the State Board should require that no personally identifiable data that it's this data diving, I heard that term used a lot, where it doesn't list a lot of things that we don't want other people to know about us personally and our children personally. And then it deletes the requirement State Board of Education combine the state accountability standards with the federal system. Now, what I'm going to do now is basically tell you if we need to, whatever, and I know there's some amendments coming, whatever you do is fine. I don't have an agenda other than I want the children to be put first. We need to think about what our students are learning. We need to think about what they need to learn, and we need to keep our expectations high. As a former teacher, a former administrator, my wife is a former elementary teacher, my son is a school board member, my daughter works for the county school system. It's bred into me that education should be first, but the child should be first. I have a lot of faith and a lot of trust in our chairman, and I know he's got some amendments, and I'm sure there may be others. And it's not that I don't care what you do with this. I just want you to put that thought first. Put our children first, and we will all come out winners. And with that, Mr. President, I'm going to ask the Senate, do their will and turn it back over to our Chairman of Education, and I thank you for the time.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Jordan, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Question for Senator.
Senator Carmichael, will you yield for a question?
Yeah, I wanted to, I think you drafted this, I believe. You drafted this, I believe. You didn't draft it? All right. But thank you, Mr. President. I was referring to Senator Carmichael since he's been in administrative and been in school business. I wanted to ask a question about how much money and how much time did we spend on Common Core? And since
Senator Jordan, I don't think Senator Carmichael yielded. Do you want to ask Senator Carmichael has yielded to the chairman. Who would you like to ask a question of, Senator Jordan?
Well, I wanted Senator Carmichael, but since he's taken his seat, I'd go to the chairman. Thank you, Mr. President. How much money have we spent?
Senator Thompson, do you yield for a question?
Certainly.
Senator Jordan, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How much money have we spent on Common Core? Getting it ready since 2010, last 5 years?
Now, who was we? The state?
The state.
Several million. You would know as well as I because we would have voted on it. So several million.
Several million. Several or seven?
Several. I don't have that before me.
Do you know who would know?
Last year I think it was $1 million or so.
Do you know who would know?
Probably the State Department of Education.
It's not a representative here to answer my question. Then.
Not in the Senate, but I mean they could be available to answer that. Not right now.
Who would secure that information for me?
You can make the request.
So you don't know?
I don't know exactly, but we've the
state. You know, but you don't know exactly. The only thing I'm trying to get at the fact, Mr. Chairman, is the fact that we're spinning our wheels We wasted time and resources of money, of dollars, of taxpayers' money. Now we're going to a new instrument. And no doubt we're going to do likewise. And all of this...
I think you're making suppositions that aren't there,
No,
Senator Jordan. This is a commission, and the commission is going to review the standards. So that's what this committee substitute does.
Well, you're an attorney. You know that State Department of Education is authorized under the Constitution of the state of Mississippi, which is...
That's correct.
Which is very old and been amended so many times. But it's still come under it. Why were they not consulted about this great change? This is a great change, and I heard Senator Carmichael say he's concerned about the children of the state of Mississippi, and so am I, very much. So why were they not authorized, since they are duly elected or appointed for such a task?
Well, this is a commission that the legislature has determined in this bill to have an independent commission review the standards, since they've been so much concern out there, to put it in a forum to discuss it. And there's a lot of people, Senator Jordan, that felt like when 2010, when these standards were adopted by the state board, they were not adopted by the legislature, that although there were hearings back there, they felt like there weren't sufficient amount of hearings to give input. And I think I don't see anything wrong with I think it's actually healthy for our state. I think it's good for the state to have a discussion on what standards only in math and reading language arts are being taught to our children K through 12.
There's
no harm in that.
Mr. Chairman, it is not healthy to be 50s. I am sick and tired of Mississippi being on the bottom educationally. And we're going into a whole new situation which may be redundant to what we have just done. So we're going to have to make some tracks and stick with something. Wouldn't you agree with that?
I agree, and I think you're right, and I think good, high-quality standards will go a long way to moving Mississippi off the bottom. But there's, again, nothing wrong. This was done in other states, including North Carolina and Florida, and it's actually something that's been suggested. These are standards, Mississippi standards, so we should certainly have control over the standards our children are taught.
But our adjacent states are not at the bottom. They're not 50s. Well, we are. And we've been there for a while. And I just want us to come to agree with something so we can move forward to help the 500,000 students we got in public school. I just think we procrastinate, we use different stuff simply because whose name may be on it, and we end up stuck at the bottom. So my point is, I don't care what you use, as long as it works to help boys and girls of the state of Mississippi. I hope if this does pass that you stick with it enough so we can get off the bottom.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I don't think anybody would disagree with you.
Thanks, Senator Jordan. I'm going to recognize Senator Tolleson to explain Amendment Number 1.
Thank you,
which is
Mr.
Senator
President.
Tolleson's amendment.
These are really some technical changes dealing with privacy safeguards. One, this commission would report to the state board on or before January 1st of 2016. That's on line 62. Then it would remove line 6061 about provide strict safeguards to protect the confidentiality of student data. There's something that runs afoul of other law. Then the third amendment on there would remove line 180 to 192 that would direct the state board to adopt a research-based formative assessment, and that's during the school year, not a cumulative assessment. This would actually add to testing, and we don't want to do that at this time. The other part would add at the end of line 218 without parental consent. And this is making sure that we preserve the privacy of student data, and that goes beyond just any test scores. This goes about religious affiliation. What are the other things in the amendment? Let me see. Any family, religion, political party affiliation, that they couldn't be collected, tracked, housed, reported, or shared with the federal government without parental consent. Then the last one renames the Mississippi College and Career Readiness Standards, basically that said we should have 60% of students scoring proficient and advanced on the assessments by 2016. And then it would put in that the accountability model that's combined now would be decoupled but be recombined of January 1st, 2016. So those are the amendments on the bill. Be
Are
happy
there
to
any
answer
questions on the amendments?
I suggest adoption of the amendment.
Are there any questions on the amendments? Seeing none, question occurs on adoption.
You know,
Do you have a question on the amendment, Senator Watson?
just
I do. I had a question on the bill as well, but my button apparently is not signifying that up there.
Well,
Tell me this.
Senator Watson, if you don't mind, I'm going to allow Senator Tollison to yield if he'd like to. Senator Tollison, would you like to yield for a question?
yes.
You're recognized,
Is this on the
Senator Watson.
amendment? On the amendment?
On the amendment,
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. On the amendment, we go back through that with me on the provide strict safeguards to protect the confidentiality of student data. Why would we pull that out?
That, yeah.
Tell me that again.
That is dealing that standards can't provide safeguards. You're not going to be able to do it with that. So,
So that's more. That is cleaned up.
yeah, I think that
Wrong place
covers
in the
it
bill.
on the other amendment that we were discussing
Gotcha.
in terms of,
And then you mentioned
Privacy protection.
on 180 through 192, taking that language out, that would actually add more testing.
yes, that's dealing with the formative assessments. Currently, the Board of Education only calls for 3 mandatory testing days. This provision would dramatically increase the number of mandatory testing days. Formative assessments during the school year instead of the end of the year. So
So
we
for
don't want to
instance-
mandate additional testing.
For instance, in my district, there was a high school that basically had no instructional days in December because of all this testing.
Right.
And so this would help in reducing some of those testing assessments.
Yes, or is not mandating any additional. So
That's beautiful. Thank you on that. And then 213 to 220, you struck that language there, but then you added it back and then added just the provision without parental consent.
correct.
And I certainly appreciate that. And then we talked about that last portion there, that it was previously we decoupled.
Yes. Well, it's not right now. It's combined state-federal model. Under No Child Left Behind, you have to have an accountability model for purposes of efficiency. They were put together, have one model in clarity, transparency, so parents will know, how their students and the schools are performing. This would decouple it up until January 1st of next year, kind of in line with this report. If there's an issue about, transitioning to the test they'll take this spring and a new battery of tests next spring.
So explain to me.
And we could come back if there's an issue about it in the legislature next year.
Sure.
And if they need to adjust that for one more year, that could be done.
But explain to me again why it has to be coupled with the federal system.
Well, it's just for efficiency. Instead of having 2 different models, this is ultimately what you get in the A through F model of grading. Instead of having 2, it just creates more paperwork if you have 2 separate models. So it's just putting them together and being able to have that, as I said, it just creates more transparency and efficiency in having a combined model. So.
But you could have, do you agree, you could have a model at the state level that mirrored the federal level without having them coupled?
That's right, but the State Board of Education could suspend that model, and then you wouldn't have any school grades.
So what is again, I understand the lack of paperwork, but the coupling to the federal model,
You're going to have to do it under No Child Left Behind anyway. They have to report that regardless. School districts do. So it just makes sense. If you're going to have to report it that with the federal model, you might as well just coattail the state model onto that.
So there's no additional burden to the state by coupling it,
That's correct.
and there is no damage done
I don't
between,
think, no, that's right.
in a sense, a state's rights issue versus federal government.
That's right. Mainly, No Child Left Behind requires you to have an accountability model. And I think going forward, if they actually reauthorize it, that will be part of it as well. So And I think we've got a good accountability model that was put together by educators over the past 2 years, as you know, as a result of really came out of that charter debate
Right.
about how we use high school graduation, previously used high school graduation rates to grade some schools, but not in all schools. So it was an apples to oranges comparison. So that's where that is.
Is there any danger in being coupled with the federal assessment component of future federal overreach? If I know there's a bill now, Senator Alexander from Tennessee has, if there was any kind of federal tinkering with standards or what have you, and they pushed it through that assessment model, if we're coupled to the federal, is that
Yeah.
going to harm us?
I don't think so, but it's something to be mindful of. And then, like I said, the legislature will come back next year and make that determination if it does need to be revisited again.
And I guess that would be my ultimate question. Would it be best to be decoupled just to prevent that from happening?
I think more states are moving to a combined model right now because, like I said, the difference of, we have the A through F grading model, and we have it in this way now. So it makes sense. And as I've said repeatedly, the combined model is more efficient. And again, it goes to the whole point of reporting this information in a single combined model. So, but like I said, if there's something that changes up in the federal level, then legislature comes back every year, and that can be revisited.
So if that did happen through the federal level, would you be in favor of then decoupling?
Yeah, we can do that.
Good.
But I want a strong accountability model, and I
Absolutely.
hope you do too.
I agree with
That's
that.
what I'm concerned about, is a watering down of the accountability model, and I think that's important.
And I think we talked about that
Yeah.
off the floor, but having that accountability is definitely important.
Okay.
But that's all my questions, Mr. President.
Thank you,
On the
Senator
amendment.
Watson. Senator Hill, do you have a question on the amendments?
Sorry, Mr. President. No, I have an amendment at the proper time.
I'll recognize you at the proper time. Does anyone else have a question on the amendment? No further questions on the amendment. Then the question recurs on adoption of amendment number 1. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no.
Okay.
The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Amendment number 1 is adopted. Senator Hill has an amendment, amendment number 2. That I have. Does the desk have? Senator Hill is going to put it on the screen. Senator Hill is going to be recognized to explain her amendment. I believe it's on the screen where everyone can see it. Senator Hill, you're recognized.
Okay. Basically, this is a simple amendment. On line 39, where it talks about what we may adopt as new standards to replace Common Core with the Standards Advisory Council. It basically says that the new standards would not be modeled after the Common Core standards regardless of title. And what that would do is prevent a rebranding of the same standards and taking the name off them. So that would prevent us from having the same thing with a different name. I think we saw that in the House, and I certainly don't want to see that come out of the Senate. On line 47, where it says, the State Board of Education shall hear recommendations from the Commission on College and Career Readiness, it would require the State Board to implement the recommendations of that commission, not just hear it. Because if we convene a commission to meet and spend taxpayers' resources and get stakeholders from all over the state, then when we do have input from our people and our stakeholders, then I think that the commission should have some actual binding weight as to what they recommend. Then on line 70, where we say that the commission has to look at standards, exemplary standards from other states, we need to add in before January 2010 to that, because that's when the states changed to Common Core. So the good standards were before January 2010. So you would add the words on line 70, before January 2010, and curriculum standards from other countries whose students consistently score at the top on international tests, including the trends in international mathematics and science in the relevant subject area. So that would require true international benchmarking to develop our new set of standards that was actually not done before. So that's all it does, is it puts safeguards in so that we don't get a remake or a rebranding of the same standards from the Commission, and it also requires that the recommendations of the Commission be implemented and not just heard. So we have to figure out if we're serious about this or if we're not serious about it. So that's basically a simple explanation of it. And I think you have some papers that were passed out. I passed out the third grade reading scores from 2010 through last year. And if you will look at those reading scores, you will see that we were steadily gaining in proficient and advanced students up until the 2013-14 school year. With the implementation of Common Core, we saw a significant drop in our current reading test that we've been given for the last few years. We saw 1,000 students less advanced. We saw over 1,000 students less proficient. And then our minimal lowest level, we added about 1,250 students to that bottom level. So we see that the negative impacts that these standards had on third grade reading, and it's across the board really on the pilot schools that implemented those. So that's why we need to make sure that we don't have standards that are modeled along the same lines as these, because we already have early data that has suggested that they have had a detrimental impact. And in 2 states, both Kentucky and New York, we have seen a significant growth in the achievement gap between minority and non-minority students since the implementation of the Common Core standards. And in the state of Massachusetts, which has consistently led the nation in scores on National Assessment of Educational Progress and in international tests, Massachusetts for the first time had a significant statistical drop in their 4th grade reading scores on the National Assessment of Educational Progress after their implementation of Common Core. So that is historical as to what's happened in Massachusetts, the leader in the United States. They were steadily climbing. They're still at the top, but the first time in anybody's recollection that Massachusetts had a significant drop in their 4th grade reading National Assessment of Educational Progress scores was when they adopted these frameworks. So I ask if you're truly serious about replacing these mediocre standards that have caused drops in test scores, that have caused achievement gaps to grow in these several states, to please support my amendment.
Senator Jordan, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
I have a question. Mr. President, I have a question for the
Senator
Senator.
Jordan. Senator Hill, do you yield for a question?
Certainly.
You're recognized, Senator Jordan.
Senator Hill, what do you find wrong, briefly, with Common Core?
We are seeing a statistically significant drop in test scores with the implementation of Common Core across the nation.
For the first time or the second time or any time?
Pardon?
For the first time, second time, or any time?
For the first time in any type of modern history in states like Massachusetts.
Wow. Are you aware that 47 governors and superintendents got together, including our former governor?
Well, our governor wasn't a part of it.
May I finish my statement? A question.
Certainly.
Are you aware that 47 governors out of the 50 got together with superintendents all over this state, including one of our former governors, and came up with this system? Are you aware of that?
Actually, that's not the case. We had a handful of people that actually wrote the standards.
Ma'am.
We had a handful of people that actually wrote the standards, and they were not governors of any states.
Ma'am, let me finish with it.
Sorry.
And we came up with Common Core Mississippi standards. Now you agree that we dropped it because we felt that it was too difficult for our children. Wasn't that part of it?
I don't think that it's too difficult for our children. I think in the lower grades, from the research that's out there, from many educational and child psychologists, some of the things in the lower grades are developmentally or cognitively inappropriate for our students. And in the high school level, we see some of the STEM framework and the mathematics that are left out of the framework. and we have seen statistically significant drops in our algebra scores in our pilot schools that implemented Common Core. We saw a 40% drop in Gulfport school districts in their Algebra 1 scores upon implementation.
And the psychologist said it was inappropriate in what way?
Developmentally inappropriate. Children's brains go through different stages of cognitive development, and children are not able to evaluate and discern certain tasks at low ages, at younger ages. And some of the things in the framework require some of the higher level thinking skills in children before they're actually developed.
Let me ask you this, and I don't mean to be technical about it, but if you observe under normal conditions a child, certainly males between 5,